Hagrid's Magical Creatures Motorbike Adventure instantly became my favorite roller coaster model after experiencing it for the first time this past summer. It has a strong layout for a family coaster, but I specifically appreciated how technologically advanced it is. So today, in Planet Coaster 2, after brushing up on some knowledge and earning my El Toro Ryan certification, I got ready to go toe-to-toe with Intamin to create the most accurate and immersive motorbike and sidecar coaster that I can. If they're using moving loading platforms, then I'm using moving loading platforms. If their eddy current brakes extend and retract, then my eddy current brakes will extend and retract. And if they want to place their lockers outside of the queue, causing you to wait in 150 plus minute lines without your phone or any loose articles at all, then god damn it, I'll do the same. Alright everybody, welcome back to another episode of Planet Coaster 2. My name is Lucius, or Luck, whichever one works. And today, 14 episodes in, we are finally going to be beginning our brand new roller coaster. So without further ado, let's begin the first part of any coaster creation, the planning phase. Alright, so here we are in a photo editor. This is a screenshot of the park as it was at the end of the last episode. I've started planning out my parks and areas like this because the end product, while it's not going to be exactly like the design, it just comes out a lot cleaner. First thing I had to do was put the track in. So I kind of sketched out a track, and as you can see in the screenshot, I kind of placed this here, and this follows that exactly. So as you can see, in the station area, we have different block sections, and I have labels too. So these are color coded by each individual block section. As you can see, it's going to be a large coaster taking up most of this section here by the water. So there'll be a right turn out of the station, but there will also be a switch track that goes backwards into the service bays for maintenance and storage, and there's 4 of them. Then the rest of the layout goes as such before heading back into the station, and then the unload station leads into the load station again. And this is what we're going to be focusing on for today's episode. Additionally, I added some park infrastructure things, so some labels for those as well. From this entrance we made last episode, there's going to be a service road. So this is just a template, you know. Everything here is subject to change, but this is just a guideline for me to start building so I'm not completely directionless. So moving on to the next step, we will now be working on the trains. Alright, so here we are with the trains, and first thing you'll notice is those aren't the motorbike and sidecar coaster trains, and you'd be right. This is a blueprint that I made maybe like 8 months ago. That's how long I've been planning out this coaster. It was before the motorbike and sidecar coaster was even added into the game. And I already designed these trains, so I thought, hey, it's gonna have the same theme, just different trains, so why not just copy some of these pieces over and try my best to make them look the exact same. So that's what I did. Now, if you aren't up to date on the series, this coaster is going into a steampunk university town themed area, which is a pretty obscure theme, but you know, that's the type of vibe I'm going for with these trains. It's supposed to look like some contraption doohickey thing created by some scientist. So that's what we're working with. Now, without giving away too much of the story of the ride, I guess I'll just say the most important part about these trains is that they contain like a power source or something. So that's what these little blue canisters are, and that will be better explained in the theming episode of this coaster. Now on the back of the train here, I'm gonna try my best to make a sort of backpack slash satchel thing out of the various cloth pieces in the game that's going to be hanging on the back of the train. As of right now, it's supposed to be important to the plot and the storyline of the coaster, but I may just end up removing that entirely. So for right now, we're just going to go with it. And being in the steampunk land, of course, I had to add a couple gears. And yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of the trains. I just recycled the older version of this train and retrofit that for the new motorbike and sidecar trains. And the newer trains definitely look a lot better. And now that these trains are out of the way, it's time to build the station. So now we're back in the park, and I'm taking that blueprint of the coaster trains we just made right there and lining it up so that we can begin the infrastructure of the ride. I had this whole plan to include almost everything underneath the actual coaster station part, so that everything at this level is literally just the part of the ride where guests board, and then the part where guests get off. And there's not really much on this level besides the maintenance area. So since I wanted stuff underneath this station, we had to completely remove all the scaffolding underneath it. And the way I'm doing that here, which is pretty much how you did it in Planet Coaster 1, you just place a bunch of paths underneath it, and the paths will make it so the scaffolding doesn't exist. And now that that's gone, we're going to be building the maintenance area, just so I know how big to make the silhouette of the building. So you can see here, I'm trying to make everything symmetrical. So we're doing these bits of track that are separated by 4-meter sections, and I'm using the same curve, the same length each time, whilst creating each of these track storage bays. Since the station is 24 meters long, the train is actually going to be about 20 meters long. So each of these bays is 20 meters long. There's never going to be an actual train on this area of the track, but hypothetically, if there was, they'd fit pretty snug on here. Now this next part wasn't my idea. I saw it on the workshop and I thought I'd try to make my own version of it. And that is using that dark ride. It is called the powered rotating ride. In the game, I completely forgot what it's called in real life, but is it an Omni mover? Basically, it works by attaching scenery to each car, whatever you want the conveyor belt to be made out of. If you attach one of those way up high, so that the car and the track is out of view, and then you set it to be testing forever, right? The cars will go around in a loop, and the bit of platform way above them looks like a moving platform, right? It looks like a conveyor belt, and if you hide the rest of this with scenery and sink it underground, it does a fairly good job at conveying that, right? No pun intended. The hardest part here was creating a layout for the Omnimover track that did not have the platforms clipping with anything else I made in the station. You just got to work around with your angles and circles and your track, and hopefully you'll be able to hide everything with scenery and it'll turn out looking pretty good. Now in the meantime, I did add the service road, and that's just so I didn't make the footprint of the building too big. I wanted everything to roughly follow the blueprint I made at the beginning anyway. And now off the back of the service road, I'm actually adding a larger rounded road that continues closer to the water, and this is supposed to be there so that larger trucks are able to traverse this very steep terrain actually. And since we're on the road, might as well add the staff parking lot that kind of squares off the building. And now the silhouette of the building is emerging, right? And you're getting the road around it, and you're like, okay, I can see where the building is going to be. It's essentially a big square with different parts sectioned off. And that's the easiest building to make, a square. So now we're going to work a little bit on the track, and this part probably strays away from the plans that I made the most. There's supposed to be like an S-bend above the water, but I instead just went for one helix downwards into, I guess, like an S-hill, but it does not follow the same silhouette as the one introduced in the plans. So that's okay, you just build around it. And I know this is not the right type of track you're supposed to use for this, so I do change it later. For those of you that don't know, the bi-tube Intamin track with the 2 rails on it is exclusively used for sections of track that are generally flat and unbanked, where the likelihood of a mechanic inspecting elements like the LSMs or something, they'd have to step on the track or cross over the track. That's what those rails are for. And now to make this area dynamic in terms of layering and visual interest, I decided to have the first part of the layout go above the path, and then after it turns around above the water, it's going to dive below the path into a trench. So that's what I'm starting to work on right here, and this will get fully fleshed out later on in the video. Now, if any of you have seen a lot of the interior sections involve this structure where the track exists, and then there are platforms on either side of the track, but then underneath those platforms there's absolutely nothing for a couple meters until there's a floor that allows mechanics or technicians to access the area below the track. Essentially, it's like double-story catwalk where the top story can be themed and then the bottom layer is just for maintenance, right? So I'm trying my best to replicate that here with these concrete or plaster pieces. Right here, I'm just trying to follow the conform of the track This whole first section of the layout probably needed to have some type of catwalking, just in case the ride needs to stop, right? So this part that goes over the path that will eventually become a bridge in the very near future is going to receive some custom catwalking, but in a different style than the part that's going to be inside the building, of course. This is closer to your traditional catwalk. Now I decided to give this bridge an industrial theme, trying to keep it, within the same realm of the rest of this themed land, but this does get changed by the end of the episode, so I'm not going to talk too much about this right now. But what does stay are these moving bits here. So I'm adding a bunch of the moving gears and the iron pistons from Planet Coaster 1. These pieces are really good, and off screen I do sync them up to some triggers so that they're not just constantly spinning. Now here we're going to get a little bit more technical. So for those of you who have watched the El Toro Ryan Problematic Coasters video on Hagrid's, halfway through the video he explains the presence of those smaller green rails that are on the track in the station area, and we're going to replicate that here. I know it's using a lot more pieces that probably need to be there, but for that extra bit of realism, I actually do quite enjoy them being here. So to make these rails, we're using these metal bits, the metal support beams, because they can shrink very, very small. That allows them to be used for almost anything, really. I just followed the way that they looked in the video as closely as I could, while also making them match up to these little bits of metal on the bottom of the train here. And I added these while working on the train. They are C-shaped rails that will catch onto these rails that are on the track. And there's one rail on each side of the train that will correspond with another one of these green rails on the other side of the track. He does explain in the video how one rail is used for charging the capacitors on the trains, because there's a lot of lights and audio, and those get powered by a capacitor that gets charged each time the coaster goes through the station. So one rail will charge the capacitors on the trains, and the other rail will monitor and control the train's speed. And this rail is essential because of the moving platforms in the station, right? It is quintessential for the trains and the moving platforms to be moving at the same speed, mostly for safety reasons. So that means these rails are important, and that's why I wanted to include them here, even though they're taking up a lot of pieces. And as far as these rails go, the left rail, which is the one controlling the speed of the moving platforms, the left rail exists wherever the moving platform is and a little bit in front of it, just so they can set the speed correctly. And then the right rail is just in the station bits where the power can be distributed. So now for another bit of scenery that's going to sit on the track, I had to throw in these green proximity sensors. These very detailed pieces are made by, I think their name on the workshop is gingestools. I'll link them in the description because I use a lot of their pieces for the technical bits of the coaster. So we're gonna throw these sensors in, and commonly you'll notice that there are two sensors back to back. I don't know why that is, but I'm assuming they're used to monitor the train's speed at any given point. I think that's why there's two of them, but I don't actually know. I'm just a Planet Coaster guy. And I am adding those sensors in front of every single block section for the coaster. Now moving on to one last bit of on-track scenery, we're going to be making the brake fins that occur on each launch section of Hagrid's. This is the reason why whenever you see the launches on Hagrid's, there are like these big blocks of LSMs, and then there's like a smaller gap in between them. So you'll see like LSM gap in that pattern. And the gaps are because of these brakes that go up and down depending on where the train is. And these brakes just allow the launch sections to act like a anti-rollback / block section. So let's say the train doesn't make it over the next hill, these brakes come back up, and then the train gets slowed down, and then it can try the launch again. And for the magnetic look of the brakes, I'm actually using these wooden planks, and the whole mechanism that controls whether these go up and down. Shout out to Taggy once again. Now whenever the train is coming, the fins will retract, and then it's timed in a way such that when the train passes, they go back up. And it gives a pretty realistic look that we will check out a bit later. Now moving on, we are adding the custom concrete catwalks. Is that a tongue twister? I don't know. We're adding the custom concrete catwalks to the maintenance area, and I do end up changing a lot of this later on, so we won't look at it too closely. But essentially, I wanted a walkway above and below each of these maintenance bays, so mechanics can work on the trains. But more on that later. Now one of these bays, the last bay on the end, I used a drop track in game, and that gives the illusion of one of these bays being able to lift the trains up and down from ground level up to station level. And I don't know if this is how they actually do it in real life. Maybe it's a super expensive way of doing it, but in my mind, let's say a new train gets delivered, they would just go where the staff parking lot is, open up the garage, and use a crane or something to lift the train onto that bit of track down there, and then it would roll into the bay, and then the hydraulics would lift the section of track up to station level, and then you can transfer it onto whatever bay or whatever part of the track you wanted it to. And for this section here, I am making a switch track from scratch. We're not going to use the in-game piece because it's too big. That thing is like 12 meters long, which is not going to fit in the station. So we're using a 4-meter section here, and then we're just going to use scenery to make it look like you can slide back and forth. And after doing all of the concrete catwalks, I had to do the channels, or I guess they're like wells that the tracks sit in. Looking back, it doesn't quite look like this in real life, but I couldn't quite do it one-to-one as it is in Hagrid's, because all of the queue occurs underneath this section of the station. So to have it being a deep well for maintenance, there just wasn't enough vertical space. So that's a bit of realism that I had to skimp out on. Hope you all will forgive me for that. Now pathing wise, infrastructure wise, the ride exit, the staff entrance, and the handicap accessibility entrance are all in the same area, and then the express lane and the standby lane lines are all in one area. There are hypothetically 5 paths that need to reach the upper station level, and I managed to condense them down into 3. I'm pretty proud of that, and that allowed me to take up the least amount of space that I needed to. And that probably would not have been possible without planning out the station like I did at the beginning. So here's the staff entrance to the load station connected to the ride exit, and then that's going to go down one staircase, but this path is also connected to the elevators, so that's everything condensed into one path over there. And then the express queue and the standby kind of exist in one stairwell, but they kind of crisscross each other, and it looks pretty cool. I'll show you guys in a bit. And as far as the interior goes, I used a lot of the townhouse brick from the sorcery set. It's just such a good piece. It's such a good texture. Like the fact that 70% of the walls in this building are using that one piece, and it doesn't look repetitive or bad, says a lot about that texture. And the fact that I couldn't find anything like that in the toy box set, that says a lot about the toy box set. I don't know. I don't want to talk trash, but at the same time, you know, just comparing DLCs. I know a lot of people have had fun with the newer DLC, but I have not found the same success with it. I'm going to be honest. But, you know, I still bought it. Now we're skipping ahead to the load station being complete. So I've done a lot of the interior in here, specifically this area now in front. This is the path and the door that leads to the maintenance bay. And then the rest of the station looks like this. We've got that overhead ride operator booth and panel above the track. I know you probably don't need it for a coaster like this, but I thought it would be cool. And since we're talking about ignoring realism a bit, in the Hagrid station, the right-hand wall should be completely empty. It should be flat, boring, and almost flush with where the train is. And that's because you load the train on the left side. Like both riders have to get in on the left side, and they both have to get off on the left side. And when you have stuff on the right side, people might get confused. They might try and exit on the right, and you don't want that. So psychologically, it just makes sense to not have anything on the right so people aren't tempted to go that way. But since it's like a game and the guests will only go where they should go in terms of a ride platform, I wanted to throw in a bit of extra theming and detail. So in that empty space in the station, I could have just walled it off, but I made a bit of a study room, like a private study. And it might not make sense, but I will explain it in the theming episode. Right now we're just getting the bones in here. Everything will be explained later, I promise. So yeah, here's the station with the train going in it, and you know, it looks cool, but realistically there should be nothing on the right side of the train at this moment. So now that that's all set up, I started working on the unload station, and this can be a bit less detailed and less grand because, well, at least for this part here where the turn is between the two stations, no one's going to be on the train. So it can be as small a tunnel, as undetailed a tunnel as you want. So after adding everything, I went back through with some more realism details. You know, we have the e-stop buttons every so often, but now we're going to end up placing first aid kits, defibrillators, emergency phone call booths, fire extinguishers, fire alarms, and all that extra stuff. Oh, and also illuminated exit signs. Those are very important, especially in kind of dimly lit areas such as this. Here you can see the beginnings of the elevator shaft, and this will go directly down into the gift shop, which will be right underneath the turn from the unload station back into the load station. One thing I really wish they would change is the bright white gate that exists on every single ride in the game. The entrance and exit gates that are just bright white are so bad. Like, at least make them black or something. Like, the bright white, it's so jarring visually. It doesn't go with any theme unless you're doing like an Apollo 13, like a Mars, a rocket, clean, sterile environment type SpaceX themed build. Then it doesn't really make sense. Now this is one use from the new toy box set. Those lights are so useful. And here I'm using them as the elevator indication lights. So there's 3 of them, meaning there are going to be 3 stories for this elevator to get off on. But only 2 are going to be visible by guests, and that's fine. And I'm again going to be using the technique of placing 2x2 invisible paths around and then placing staff members on those paths because they physically can't move, so they're just stuck there, and it's almost like having an animatronic or something, or like themed staff members. And because this is an industrial themed area, I used the mechanic and colored them in a way that makes it, you know, it's almost like the staff members have uniforms on and they're like themed, you know? That would be such an incredible feature for them to add if Frontier would do such a thing, but I don't see that coming anytime soon. So yeah, that's pretty much the completed unload station. Let's move on to some interiors. So a bit of time has passed, and as you can see, I punched a hole in the wall out here right by the backstage gate, and this is going to be the interior of the gift shop and the area that you have to walk through when you exit the ride every time. And this just goes up to a staircase up to the area I was talking about earlier, where all of the paths converge into one single area so everything can be routed neatly. And this is how that looks from the exterior, and that's what the hallway looks like from the outside. It looks pretty bad, but that's why we just cover everything up, right? So I've made more progress on the interior, and this was very inspired by Mary's Revenge, one of their recent videos, where they made an interior that was just the best thing I've ever seen in this game. So I wanted to do a build mirroring that, as you can see. So the inside has been flushed out a bit more with a few more details, and I've actually started working on the locker room now, all underneath the ride station right up there. And I'll explain more as we get the lighting in here, but we have roof molding, we have wainscoting in, and things just look pretty good. Now for this gift shop, I started realizing that we were a bit cramped on space. So since the walls right here had a bit of dead space in between them, I decided to punch them out where these cash registers are and inset them a bit into the wall so that they will be flush with the wall, and it gives a lot more interior space for the gift shop. Well guys, the interior is pretty much done now. We've got all of the wall detailing, all of the roof, and all of the floor detailing in, as well as the lighting. And yeah, if you saw the Mary's Revenge video, yeah, this was very inspired by that. So what I personally took from that video is that because the lighting is probably one of the strongest aspects of Planet Coaster 2, that you should try to highlight it in most of your builds. And one way to do that is by your use of materials. So as you can see here, a lot of the materials are reflective. You know, whether that's the metal framing that's sunken into the wooden walls to make them shiny, or that's the marble flooring, whatever it is, a lot of it's reflective, because that's what this game excels at, in conjunction with having lots of unique lighting, right? So that's the whole gift shop. The artwork back there was made by a user named lilibat from the Reddit and also from the workshop. I will be linking their stuff below. Just look at the interior here. That whole pathway, it just looks like a school building, right? Because this is on a campus after all. The lower stories will be like classrooms and such, lecture halls, and then the upper area will be like storage or maintenance or like research. So just like a bit less finished. And I've decided that in these stairwells, we would just do these exposed brick and have it look super industrial. And that contrast with the stucco and wainscoted moldings of the other areas of the building. That's this interior done for the most part. Let's move on to something else. On a side note, I've redefined the thrill categorization for the attractions in my park. So we've renamed everything 1 through 5. Oh, hey, what's that truck doing here? And additionally, while working on the signs, I thought I needed a test seat out front. And since no one on the workshop had made a test seat for the Intamin Motorbike and Sidecar Coaster, I thought I'd make one. So here's what I came up with. This one was modeled after the one in-game. So when you look at the real life trains, it doesn't quite look like this, but it looks pretty spot on to the ones in-game. I thought I'd throw this on the workshop for you guys. So now we're going to actually work on placing the queue bits. And I wanted to do the very universal thing of having the queue split off into, you know, the standby and express versions right at the beginning. I first had to test if this was possible in Planet Coaster 2, so that's what I'm doing right now. I had to make this queue apparatus thing of having these two 2-meter section queue path things connecting to the same edge of a 4-meter bit of path. And you see here, it looks like it works, but you'd be surprised at how inconsistent the queue and pathfinding functionality in this game is. So I then had to make this into a blueprint and then try it out in a different park. So here we are. I'm placing 2 of the newer flat rides, and you know, I turned on super speed and I was wondering why the left one wasn't working before I realized that the wave ride requires you to have a changing room so guests could get on it. After correcting that mistake and using a regular flat ride, we just had to simulate a little bit, and yeah, you can see both guests can queue from the same bit of path. You know, they're choosing which one they want to go on, and everything works very well. So now that that's confirmed, we can place it back into our park here. So here's me building the 2 queues that begin parallel before diverging. The left one will be the express path that just goes up to the staircase right here, and we link that up. And then the right one will end up being the standby line, where it'll go through its own theming and showrooms and stuff, but that's for a later episode. Alright, so here is what the garage or maintenance area looks like now. I've sort of flushed it out with these bits, again by the creator gingestools. You can see it's pretty immersive how detailed these things get. The box of upstop wheels from Automax everywhere. This is, you know, obviously the in-game version of Intamin, the in-game off-brand version of Intamin. So I just threw a bunch of tools around. You see we got the welder there, the presses, waste management, some tools, mobile cranes, a pallet jack, mobile workstation, workshop, workbench, you know, all the things that would be in a mechanic's workshop. I don't know how accurate all of this stuff would be to be in like a room like this, and I know certainly that when there's a lot of things rolling around, like the cart here, there should be like a lip or like a bumper on the edge of all of these paths so that you can't just roll the thing down and then it falls on top of the track, right? Got some WD-40 over here, a clamp, some wheel grease, and then as you can see, I changed the flooring. Like I said, I added this lower section so that the mechanics can actually access the wheels and stuff. That's what the maintenance area looks like as of right now. And then here is the stairwell area that is getting finished up as well. So I've placed a lot of the queue down now, and if we ascend here, the longest staircase in the history of queues, we reach this upper area, and it's sort of like a greenhouse stairwell, exposed mechanical bits and plants everywhere. These stairwells are going to be the only parts of the building with natural light, so I wanted to have some plants in here. Machinery next to plants and a skylight doesn't make the most sense, but it's pretty damn cool. Alright, so here's the mechanical workshop. Now that I've got the roof on it, I've just added a bunch of smaller details like the fire alarms. Again, some lights in the ceiling, some greebling things, vents, and this big steel structure in the ceiling. So if I turn the lights on, and you can see we've got these wheels on the structure, so it's like this thing can move horizontally to choose which car, or it can move in the other direction to determine which maintenance bay it's going to be operating on. Realistically, for something like this to exist, I probably need more supports and bracing in the ceiling. So moving on into the outside of the facade, you can see I've rounded out the corner of the build, and I placed the stop signs and stuff, and this is one of those convex mirrors that allow you to see what's around the corner. The whole outside of this building is just black plaster, same as the other facade building that we made, I think it was 2 episodes ago now. And here is the maintenance bay front area that gets, you know, accessed by the parking lot road area. And this was heavily inspired by a receiving area. If you've ever worked in a warehouse type structure or type situation, this will look familiar. Like the semi trucks would back up to here and things would get unloaded this way. And then I added those tire marks and the caution diamond thing for a bit of extra realism. Labeled the gates as well as the building. This is now M9. Yeah, things look pretty polished. And this is what the queue looks like. So I got a bit longer. Oh, and also I made this cover for the first launch bit area. The style, it's very Victorian, but I try to make a lot of things out of metal too to go with the steampunk. So if anything is explicitly Victorian steampunk, it's this. Overall, I'm pretty proud of it. It's still not done yet, but this is just to make that area pop, because, you know, when you look from back here, it's bright red, it's got interesting bulbous shapes, it draws attention. So it's another interesting thing to look at in the sightline as you look from across the park. Additionally, you can see I'm bolstering the stone wall here on the waterfront. This will all get finalized pretty soon here, but right now I'm trying to make the landscape look interesting. And I know for sure that I want some type of greenery here, because you look at the rest of the steampunk area, there is no greenery at all. And that was kind of on purpose, right? Because every area so far in the park, I've used foliage as a crutch. So I thought it would be a pretty fun restraint to limit myself on how much foliage I'm actually allowed to use in this area. And that way I can get a lot more creative with the composition and my clutter and my detailing. And this overall should force me to become a better builder instead of just relying on trees and plants and bushes all the time. But that being said, the areas that I do place those things will actually be enhanced, right? Because there's so few trees around in this area. And moving along, we've got this tunnel. So as you can see, the track does start above the path, and then now it goes below it. This is again trying to mirror one of those launches on Hagrid's, specifically the one that launches you straight into that airtime hill that is pointing towards the castle ruins, right? And so underneath these platforms, it's supposed to be like this hollow section where all the machinery is housed, right? And it's to keep it safe from the rain and also easy to access by mechanics. And you see what I highlighted there? That's those are all the moving platforms I used in order to get the retracting and extending brake systems here. And something else I thought that would be pretty cool is if the queue went parallel to the launch, so that while you're waiting in this section, you can watch the trains go by. And hopefully I'll get some type of light sequencer going so it looks pretty interesting from the queue's perspective, because it is a pretty long queue. This kind of ride is generally supposed to be the most popular ride in the park. I know it for sure it is at Islands of Adventure. That's for damn sure. So as much intrigue as you can add to the queue, the better, honestly. And here, you know, because of that launch section also acting as a block section, you also need a way for a guest to evacuate in the case of like an E-stop. So here we have a ramp. It's an ADA compliant ramp with the extra wide landings. And that just brings you up into the maintenance road parking, staff parking area. And that'll be a safe way to get back into the park. That's what we got up to now. Let's make a little bit more progress. Alright, so we're checking in again, and I've made a little bit more progress. Now we have the supports for the section that goes over the water. And the first thing that will jump out to you is that, yeah, these are not very conventional supports. I'd like to imagine roller coaster manufacturers, they don't like when my park calls them up, right? Like, we look at the first coaster, and that was a Mach Rides coaster, the Mach Hyper. And as you can see, I built some stylized supports. They're not that strange. Like, you can see the flange at the top. It's like we added the wood section, and it's just like you just bolt that on there, and it's not too out of the ordinary. But we look back at these newer supports on the Intamin, and these are straight up out of the Eiffel Tower. I mean, these are something, right? That was actually the inspiration. So I wanted it to look super unique, and specifically because this was sticking out over the water and it's almost visible from everywhere in the park. Just these supports here will be like this. Maybe another element will look like this later in the layout. But moving on, you can see the trench has been fully developed. I've got these stone walls, and I've got the divide in the walls between the two colors, you know, for like water staining lower, right? Got the lighter brown up top, and then the black stones, the darker stones towards the bottom. And then as you can see, using the rough concrete texture now, things just look so much better with those. I don't know why they took over a year to add them into the game. It's such an essential part of theme park building. Started adding a bit of the greenery, and by greenery I mean 2 trees and 2 potted plants. And that's already too much, to be honest. I might have to scale that down a bit. I don't know, it's getting too, the earth is looking too healthy around here. I guess moving on, another thing I've been working on is the tunnel. That door at the bottom is supposed to represent the maintenance access into all the launch components and the hydraulics, you know, the power components, all of that's accessible underneath the catwalks. So that's accessed by the door. We've got electricity meters everywhere. We've got power boxes. We got the sensors placed again. Some switches, another door, another ladder, lighting, you know, just an electricity box. And and those are some of the more realistic supports, because not all of them are going to look like the Eiffel Tower, like I said earlier. And this door, it should lead into a hallway that, you know, goes back somewhere that's accessible only by staff. Now for the actual launch tunnel. As you can see, I added a bit of greebling. It's literally just the pistons and some piping, and I spaced them quite randomly. I just wanted it to look like I placed a lot of pieces here, but it's really about like 20 or so pieces. You know, the effect when you're going past here at like 40 miles an hour, all you're gonna see are the colors and the shapes. Between the path above and the top of this tunnel, it's like less than a foot of clearance. For that reason, we needed several of those arches to act as bracing. Now underneath each of these LSMs, we've got power boxes, and then underneath each of these little bracket things, we've got the retractable eddy brakes. There you can see the brake as it's in its retracted state. That is because the train is on the way and the game is paused. But if I unpause it, here it comes. So we've made sure that the ride clears and then the brakes come back up. And I did stagger them a little bit, so there's like a 1/10 of a second where the far one comes up before the closer one. This part of the ride just looks so photorealistic. I love the lighting in this game. But yeah, that's as much of the launch tunnel as we're gonna get to in this episode. So moving along, there's this bit of extended queue we've got here. I've just closed it off in a box, and we'll theme it in a later episode. Right here, there's another bit of extended queue, which again, we'll theme later. I just had to get this all in here. And that means we've got to cover all of this up. It's going to take some thoughtful planning to build up this stairwell section in a way that mimics the skylight and the potted plants, the greenery, and the other stairwells, which means it's got to build up pretty tall. But at the same time, we don't want that visible from the path. So we're going to need facades that are pretty tall to cover that as well. And they have to go along with the same building silhouette that we've been building, so that it's believable to be of the same structure anyway. But yeah, let's start working on one of these facades. Alright, well here we are with the first facade made, as well as the outline for the second facade area. Now this was inspired by a few universities. One is a Dutch university, actually, the University of Groningen, and the second building this was inspired by was Rostock University, or the University of Rostock, and that one's a German university. And one thing I realized while looking up a bunch of these European colleges is that you guys sure love your architectural statues, huh? I made sure to include a couple of them in the front, and as you can see how I wrapped up the back of this area, I wanted to have the tall well of the staircase while also blocking off the view from the path. So this is a good compromise. It's got the long rectangle of the stairwell, and then this diagonal kind of connecting to the front of the facade. And then if I can just detail these two faces of the building, everything should come together pretty well. And here's the lift situation that I came up with. And additionally, I've added this line of LEDs outlining both sides of the tunnel that the coaster goes through. Maybe later I'll have those lights like react when the coaster goes by it. I think it took me a whole day to make this, as you can see how detailed it is, and I end up placing so many of those marble pieces. They work great for creating colors that don't really exist. Since the marble pieces are two-toned, you can do two colors that are close by, and then from far away they appear as the average of those two colors. There's just a lot of color blending you can do with the marble, and additionally it reflects light very well, so it's just a superior texture in the game. But anyway, looking at the front facade of this building, you may have noticed that it's being really accentuated here by the lighting. I feel like this is a pretty full circle moment from the beginning, because that whole gift shop interior was inspired again by Mary's Revenge, and I felt like the natural progression of that would be to use those principles, but just on exterior lighting now. And the way to do that is by building at a specific angle and taking advantage of cardinality. Whereas in here in the interior, you know, it's a very controlled environment. Like your light sources, you control how it looks, essentially. Like, oh, if this area is too dark with this lamp, oh, I can just sink another headlight behind it, and then that'll make it even brighter. You can illuminate things easier, and you can make things darker easier. Just don't light it up as much. But the same thing does not hold when you're working with exteriors, because the sun is dynamic, and depending on the time of day, it's gonna make your buildings look a lot different. So, any world you have, the sun will rise and it'll set in at particular places in the sky every single time. And that's, for me, that's behind that mountain over here and behind this mountain over here. And that means anything along that line that the sun traverses will be emphasized based on what time of day it is. This building gets hit directly with the line of the sunlight, and you know, that's on purpose. That's kind of my take on that video, and I'll link it in the description because it is so inspiring to see that much detail being put into a build in Planet Coaster. So up close here is the crest of the university. I know I didn't show it off in the last episode that much. I threw a cat on top because why not, right? It looks good from below. The most important thing is color and shape, and I think that's what I can do really well in this game, I found. One thing you will notice is that there's like a stark contrast from the beginning of the steampunk area to this campus area. Earlier in the region, it looks very sketchy, like there's smog, there's a bunch of steam blowing everywhere, it's dirty, it's rusty, and then here it looks clean as hell, like they just pressure washed everything, and I don't know, so I may have to go back and tone down the brightness of the stones a little bit. We're gonna have to bake some history into these walls, so we'll probably do that next, I don't know. Wow, so apparently this video is long as hell, so I'm gonna try and wrap up quickly. Here is what the tunnel looks like now, and I have rearranged some of the assets, so now the entrance gate to the university is right below the bridge that we just made. With the coaster going by, it's super dynamic, the moving gears, lots of noises, lots of textures, lots of colors. It's overall a more impressive presentation than the previous sign, but we're just gonna have to do some rearranging of the other area when we get to that. So on the waterfront, I added these tables, and people can sit here and watch the train go by. It's pretty nice. Look across the lake, see the other parts of the park. On the other side, I added all this piping and greebling, and here's what the facade looks like now. So I've detailed those brick walls. I'm like 90% sold on it. Like, I love the textures, I love the shapes and colors and stuff, but something just feels off about it. So I'm gonna fiddle with that a little bit. Got those large round windows, and in here, moving mechanical bits where the launch section happens. It's like some steam engine piston is being compressed, and that's what powers the launch or something. Over this bridge, I added this net, and oh look, some poor soul lost their hat that they probably got really overpriced at the gift shop. And down here, I added this gate. It's like the coaster is bursting through the doors, so one's still on the hinge and the other has fallen off and is beginning to rust. Now, this area does have path under it, so people can walk up here, like there's seating and stuff, but what's behind that door now is a staff building. And then when we finish out the area, there will be a way for staff members to go directly from the parking lot up to the staff building and into the park. Now I've just got a few closing shots, so we're going to end the video here. Hopefully it's not too long. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I know generally people build entire coasters in one episode, but there were just too many details, too many layers for me to include. If I did everything in one episode, you guys would not have been getting a video until like February. This way I can divide things up and it's easier to edit, but this was still an absolute bear to edit. So I would really appreciate it if you guys left a like or a comment or subscribe, you know, all that stuff. Very cool. And yeah, so that's gonna do it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and Merry Christmas, whatever you celebrate. If you celebrate anything right now, happy holidays. Take care, guys, and bye-bye.